Hey, what's up everyone? In today's video, we're going to be going over Bitcoin and see where we're currently positioned in the markets. I think it's quite safe to say that no one really knows where Bitcoin is going on the shorter time frames. Now, this is where the Elliott Wave Theory becomes quite difficult in terms of really finding some kind of conviction. This is where the theory actually starts to get exposed to an extent on the micro time frames, and a lot of people lose faith because it can get so complex, especially when we have been ranging for so long and especially on lower volume. But sometimes we really have to zoom out to truly see what the overall story is telling us. I believe that anything more complex than this idea you're seeing here, we are going to be positioned for a far more bearish approach, and I'll explain why. Now, the Elliott Wave Theory so far has set us up very nicely on the macro and given us all the opportunities. But since we haven't broken any immediate supports, nor have we broken the regional bottom where we bounced 30%, we still have to be technically bullish, right? Well, that depends on your personal bias, and I think right now many are really resorted down to their personal bias and focus more on trying to be right on the micro time frames than focusing on the overall picture. I think we're seeing a lot of bulls shifting in their confidence, which is understandable. Even I'm still stumped on how this whole range could be completed. So this brings me on to the point that I don't think that there is going to be any in-betweens for these bullish or bearish ideas, meaning I don't think that there will be another bottom where a wave 4 will be elongated like a lot of bulls are seeing. So that is where I actually disagree with the bulls, nor do I don't think that we'll be creating a more complex structure because the general markets don't see the same termination points as us as Elliott Wave analysts. So it's really a Mexican standoff between the bulls and the bears. Now, in my opinion, the best way to approach the current market situation is one, making sure that you have narrowed down the scenarios as best as possible. Remember, the Elliott Wave Theory doesn't provide perfect outcomes. It's a toolbox. It rather gives you the probabilities to work with. Second, zoom out. This is the most important thing. Where does the macro still tell us where we're currently positioned? Is it still bullish or is it bearish? Currently, of all scenarios, the bullish idea still has the highest weight just based on symmetry, geometry, and overall look of how the impulsive structure to the upside is happening. So once you have narrowed down one or two bullish or bearish ideas, you just have to find the highest probability between the two and then work upon them. Anything more complex than what we have already discussed, such as creating a complex correction, aka sideways combos, you are essentially in a dead man's zone. I say this because it starts to become very uncharacteristic of Bitcoin's price action since its inception. We have a pretty clear idea of how Bitcoin's price zones distribute. They resolve far sooner than many think. I believe we are very close to resolving one way or the other. And the last move down right here for that possible wave 4 is pretty much the prelude to how I believe it's either going to be shooting to the upside or to the downside. I don't think that there's any in-betweens. So in order to achieve simplicity, you need to have one or two bullish ideas, like I said, one or two bearish ideas, and then conviction. For now, the conviction for me personally is because we just have a technical bottom with 30% bounce, I have to just remain bullish and we have to exhaust all of the micro time frame ideas. So there will always be market inefficiencies on the shorter time frames, and I think that's where a lot of missed opportunities happen on the macro because it's seen way too complex and we get lost in translation on the small wins within the micro time frames. So you got to now go back and forth between the possible rarity of the patterns on the shorter time frames, then bet against on whether the rarity of those shorter time frame patterns is enough to bet against the larger time frames. Meaning, if we have a very high possibility of a technical bottom on the macro, is the rarity of the micro time frame patterns enough to justify against the macro time frames? That is up for you to decide, but I personally believe we are in a perfect storm to seriously give both sides a punishment one way or the other before we either move to the upside or to the downside. That's been Bitcoin's distribution and behavior for the past decade. We resolve these patterns very quickly and swiftly, and we are at the peak point of either validating or destroying either of the bullish or bearish idea. Now, we have to dive in, and we are going to be talking about the shorter time frames on the rarity and also what kind of patterns that could be playing out for both the bullish and bearish ideas. So with that being said, In respect to the bullish idea of this macro idea, again, we have the possibility of a 1-2 being a flat, 3-4, and we're now completed with this wave 4. And for the past few weeks, we have been talking about how this move up currently is being created as a possible pattern for going into the first wave before we create the rest of the waves 2, 3, 4, 5 respectively for the higher degree primary wave 5. That is the only way that we should be focusing unless we're losing a lot of confidence in terms of how the overall pattern is being played out. So are we losing a lot of the pattern confidence in the shorter time frames that's enough to justify the macro? I believe we haven't exhausted everything just yet. I think people are focusing too much on the micro time frames and justifying it that this idea is now completely out of the picture. Because if we go into the possible bullish idea, so if we put this into this and we pull up the bearish idea, is it enough to justify that this idea is going to be playing out, where there's a possible 1-2 flat happening, where we're now ready to go all the way down to $15,000 to the $10,000 regions? Again, having a 1-2 flat of this large of a caliber is really rare on the macro. So you're really betting against the ideas of how the macro is playing out. I would rather have this idea get invalidated first and then get that opportunity where the pullbacks will happen for a possible shorting opportunity before we can really say on how the bearish idea is going to be playing forth. So let's go into the shorter time frames. Hopefully that was a little bit of a helpful approach on how you can make the macro and micro time frames kind of work in tandem with each other. So again, in my opinion, I believe that we still have that wave 3-4 completed. Now, that's just the only way we can see it, because this has a far better look to say that this wave 4 is completed instead of saying that this move up and then we're coming back down. It's just uncharacteristic of the distribution patterns we have seen for Bitcoin in the past decade. A lot of the times, Bitcoin is just resolving itself in a larger triangle rather than having some kind of sideways combo. We've never seen those types of patterns. And even if they did a sideways pattern, they were done in this kind of fashion here, where we saw the possibility of just a normal flat. But even here, it distributed very nicely. It's very characteristic of Bitcoin's patterns that have been playing out for the past decade. We are really prone to these ideas. We know this idea, right? It's called the Bart-Simpson pattern. There's a reason why these Bart-Simpson patterns have been occurring for quite some time. It's because it's part of distribution patterns, how the tendency of Bitcoin's behavior plays with the observations of the Elliott Wave Theory. So this flat idea fitted very nicely. So what about this idea? It's complex in nature, or it could be a simple ABC. However, it does fit in the idea that we've had some kind of resolution phase at the final C wave where we broke the regional lows and we got a pretty strong bounce. Now, this is where we have to kind of make the assumption whether this is going to be the continuation to the upside or to the downside. I don't think that there's going to be another wave forward to the bottom. So with that being said, with the current idea, I still believe now it's getting quite rare in the complexity of how these patterns are playing out. I still think that the diagonal idea is still in play. Why? Because everything is moving correctively off of the lows. This means that we have a 3 here, 3 here, 3 here, and a possible 3 here that could be completed for this wave forward. Now, it could still continue to, move down further, all the way down to the 56K levels before this diagonal gets completely entirely invalidated. That is just how I'm seeing it, because again, the macro picture still shows us that there's a high possibility that this is the bottom. So with that being said, I think that we could be creating one more corrective move to the upside, and then we'll get that wave 1-2 pullback, and then we're off to the races for wave 3 of the primary degree on this current micro time frame structure. So the leading diagonal is still valid until it isn't. I think a lot of people are trying to force people to understand that this rarity of the pattern is enough to justify the larger picture that it's not possible. It's absolutely possible. It's just, of course, a little bit lower in probability, but it doesn't mean it's justified to be completely invalidated. It's not invalid, nor is it too low of a possibility. We've seen expanded diagonals happen all of the time. We've seen patterns where we've had very elongated actionary first wave and then a short wave 3 or a wave C. So that is the possibility of the diagonal. The second idea is the flat idea. I believe we're starting to get either two resolutions on two possible resolutions on how this flat could be playing out. We have the possibility of a running flat area, which means that we've created the price extreme for a wave B. We've landed very nicely in between the 123.6 and the 138.2%, which is very, very nice for a B pocket zone. And then either the running flat idea in this green box is going to be terminated and we're off. Now, this is far rare. However, there is a coincidence that we are being supported on the 100% Fibonacci extension against this wave A. So this partner leg against this partner leg, we are seeing the 100% zone being pretty nicely respected. With that being said, we also have the possible expanded idea where we may be creating another 5-way move to the downside for this expanded flat zone, but it is starting to look quite unlikely. So bears are also stumped as well here, because now they have to be creating some kind of possibility to offset this actionary wave that we had to the downside, that this move here has to be justified for this larger wave 4 as well on the micro time frames. So a lot of hypocrisy is going back and forth between a lot of these internal counts, right? So the flat idea right now, we have a possibility, just because we're correcting so long, could be possibly the end of an ending diagonal of some sort for this wave C. I just don't see it any other way. But again, the idea, because we have a lot of the evidence being built up, I believe that the running flat idea is also a high possibility. Meaning that this here, we're finding some supports, and also the momentum indicators are starting to show bullish divergences. Now, those can fail, and that's why we have to resort to the idea that the expanded flat idea is also in play, because we haven't really come down to the normal Fibonacci retracement of the 61.8% nor the 78.6%. So that's also still on the table. So keep this in mind. Now, the flat idea is resorted down to two sub-ideas of the running flat or the expanded flat, and the running flat idea is now at peak validation, where this can either pump up now or we can come down to the expanded flat zone. So that's that. We also have the idea of a 1 2 1 2. We could have a diagonal going into 1 2 3 4 5 into another wave 1, and then we have a possible correction here that's complete for this wave 2. Again, a validation of this immediate support, and then we have this hard invalidation, which is next, but that won't be a 1 2 1 2 idea. Again, with that, breaking this, the only idea resorted is going to be the expanded flat idea. So that's that. And then we have the idea of going into the bearish idea. That's the only way that I am now seeing a possible bearish idea. Until we actually start to break these lows here and we start to lose the faith of the expanded flat idea, I think that this idea is now going to be the next possible step, where there's going to be no in-betweens for a possible wave 4. This has to be seen as a completed entire resolution phase of the beginning of a wave, which means that this whole move is now bringing us into a wave 1 and this into a wave 2. Now, there's a problem with this idea as well, because there is the problem of the rarity of the micro time frame bearish ideas, of the patterns, meaning that you're also betting against the rarity of the bullish ideas. But now you have to really be high conviction that this really rare expanded diagonal idea of a leading diagonal variation is the actual pattern in itself because of these overlaps. So do you want to see this corrective move here as the beginning of something or the termination of something? I'd rather see it as the termination of something until we actually break these lows. So what does that mean? Remember, I said there's going to be no in-betweens where we're seeing another WXY to the downside. I just don't see that happening. It's not common for Bitcoin unless we just entirely dump and then we get a straight V-shaped recovery. Right now, we don't have any of those evidence popping up. So with that being said, this whole corrective move up is utilized the same way, basically. We're seeing this as a 3-wave structure to the upside for a possible wave 2. And not only that, we have this wave W against this wave Y being very short against this W, because we've only hit the most uncommon target of the 61.8% in terms of the relationship of these waves here. Usually you want to see at least a 101 hit, and the 101, there's a problem with the 1-to-1 as well, because it brings us really near the all-time highs. And at that point, you're going to be bullish anyways, right? So it's pretty much it now. I would say this is pretty much the final straw for how the bears are going to be, seeing this possible move. I'm going to be on the side of bears if we start to break these regions here. So don't give up, bears, because there is a high possibility that these levels can break. And if we do, I'm not going to be siding with the bulls at that point. I'm going to be siding with the bears and that wave 2 pullback to the upside, where a lot of people think that this will be the wave 4 and that will be the continuation to the upside. For me, I'll be seeing this as the corrective move to the upside than anything else when we start to get that impulsive extension to the downside. So that is how we're going to be seeing it, ladies and gentlemen. This zone here for this bearish idea, when we get this larger actionary wave to the downside, I think that it'll be where the wave 3 of the primary degree will kind of situate itself, and also this will be the support, instead of seeing that this is going to be the possible wave 4 support area before we move to the upside. So that's how distribution patterns work, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be seeing this whole move here as a completed resolution phase for the beginning of something, and then this is now the beginning of something to the downside for the bearish ideas. So that's how I'm currently seeing it. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful, ladies and gentlemen, to get you a little bit of more insight on how these patterns could be playing out. I'm still focusing on the overall narrative of being the bullish idea until everything is invalidated entirely. We still have a lot of ways to go down until we entirely invalidate this possible wave 4 before we can really discuss. However, there is a little bit of ways we can find in terms of how we can transition into the bearish idea, because if it starts to move impulsively down, we are going to lose a lot of faith in all these ideas, and also the bearish idea is now going to be coming into play more than that possible wave 4. So you see where I'm currently situated at. I'm in between everyone else, and that's how we're going to be seeing the markets going forward. So we'll focus more on the shorter time frames in the next video. I'll make sure to have a video coming out starting possibly tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll see. Thank you very much. I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a fantastic rest of the weekend. Bye-bye.